EU fractures over energy dependency. Germany breaks ranks. NATO summit collapses. Europe turned pale the moment Germany dropped a bombshell that no amount of diplomatic damage control could diffuse. 273 billion euros. That is the number. 273 billion euros in industrial output that Germany has lost since 2022 because of energy prices that have remained between 200 and 400% above pre-crisis levels, according to figures released by the German Federal Statistical Office on April 27, 2026. Let that number sink in. This is not just an economic statistic. This is the slow-motion death certificate of European industrial competitiveness, written in the language of shuttered factories, relocated production lines, and an economic base that is bleeding out across the continental divide between European energy costs and Asian energy costs. And when the German chancellor stood before the NATO summit on April 29 and declared that Germany would resume negotiations with Moscow for long-term natural gas supply agreements, breaking with the unified Western sanctions posture that has been the centerpiece of Euro-Atlantic solidarity since 2022, the fracture that had been building for 4 years split wide open. How did 273 billion euros in lost industrial output force Germany to break with NATO's Russia policy? Why is this fracture more dangerous to the Western alliance than any military threat? What happens to European unity when its largest economy prioritizes industrial survival over geopolitical solidarity? Stay with us. If you want analysis that follows the money rather than the speeches, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Drop your reaction in the comments. The number, 273 billion euros, represents the cumulative difference between Germany's actual industrial output since 2022 and what that output would have been at pre-crisis energy prices. The calculation, performed by Germany's own statistical authority, accounts for factory closures, production relocations to countries with cheaper energy, reduced operating hours at energy-intensive facilities, and the cascading effect of higher input costs on Germany's manufacturing supply chains. BASF, the world's largest chemical company, has shifted major production capacity from Ludwigshafen to China and the United States. Volkswagen has announced the closure of 3 German manufacturing plants. ThyssenKrupp's steel division has reduced output by approximately 30%. The German industrial model, the Mittelstand backbone of small and medium manufacturers that made Germany the world's 3rd largest exporter, is being hollowed out by energy costs that make German production fundamentally uncompetitive against Asian and American manufacturers who pay a fraction of the price for the same kilowatt of electricity and the same cubic meter of natural gas. German natural gas prices currently hover around approximately 40 euros per megawatt hour, compared to approximately 12 euros in the United States and approximately 9 euros in China. German industrial electricity prices are approximately 3 times the American level and over 4 times the Chinese level. These are not marginal differences. These are structural differentials that make entire categories of German manufacturing economically unviable. A German steel mill paying 4 times the energy cost of a Chinese competitor cannot survive on efficiency gains alone. A German chemical plant paying 3 times the American energy cost cannot compensate with innovation alone. The math is terminal, and the math drove the chancellor's decision. The NATO summit collapse followed a predictable chain of escalation. When Germany announced its intention to resume energy negotiations with Russia, Poland immediately threatened to veto any NATO communique that did not explicitly condemn the move. The Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, issued a joint statement describing Germany's decision as a betrayal of European solidarity. France, operating as always in the gray zone between Atlantic solidarity and continental independence, declined to criticize Germany publicly while privately welcoming the opening as a potential path toward a broader European rapprochement with Moscow. Britain condemned the decision, but offered no alternative energy solution. The summit, which was supposed to produce a unified statement on the alliance's strategic direction for 2027, produced nothing. The communiqué was never issued. The fracture was visible, documented, and irreversible. In Moscow, Germany's decision is being received as the strategic vindication of Russia's long-term energy leverage strategy. Russia always understood that European sanctions on Russian energy were a temporary measure sustained by political will rather than economic logic, and that political will would erode as the economic costs accumulated. 4 years and 273 billion euros later, the erosion has reached the largest economy in Europe. In Beijing, the EU fracture over energy is being studied as confirmation that Western alliance solidarity is a consumable resource, not a permanent condition, and that economic pressure applied patiently over sufficient time can crack any political coalition. In Washington, the fracture is generating classified assessments that describe the NATO energy split as more strategically damaging than any Russian military action since the annexation of Crimea, because it demonstrates that economic self-interest will override geopolitical solidarity when the cost differential becomes large enough. First, the 273 billion euro industrial loss is not a temporary setback. It represents a permanent reallocation of European manufacturing capacity to regions with structurally lower energy costs, a reallocation that will not reverse even if energy prices normalize, because the factories have already moved and the capital has already been invested elsewhere. Second, Germany's decision to break with NATO's unified sanctions posture represents the triumph of economic survival over geopolitical solidarity, a triumph that was inevitable from the moment Europe decided to sever its energy relationship with Russia without securing a comparable alternative supply at comparable prices. Third, the NATO summit collapse is not a procedural failure. It is a structural fracture between the economic interests of Western Europe, which requires affordable energy to maintain industrial competitiveness, and the security interests of Eastern Europe, which requires Russian containment to maintain national survival. These interests are fundamentally incompatible under current energy market conditions. Fourth, the primary beneficiary of the EU fracture is Russia, which has demonstrated that energy dependency is a strategic weapon more effective than any missile system, because it operates on timescales that democratic political systems cannot withstand. The old unity is dying. The unity that was supposed to be permanent, that was supposed to demonstrate that democratic alliances could endure any pressure, that was supposed to prove that values could override interests when the stakes were high enough. That unity lasted 4 years and 273 billion euros. The bill is still waiting. The number has not been answered. And Germany has just delivered the loudest message in modern European history, that no alliance survives indefinitely when the cost of solidarity exceeds the cost of defection, and that the cost has now been exceeded. What do you think happens to NATO if Germany fully restores its energy relationship with Russia? Drop your honest answer in the comments. We read every one. If this analysis opened your eyes, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Until next time, stay sharp.